Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We just wanted to give you the tiny URL in case you need that. We will have that at the end of the presentation as well.
And it's just MTSS and then today's date. So if you're not grabbing it because you're still getting settled, it's tinyurl.com, MTSS, and then 11/1/23. So it's today's date.
We just wanted to take a minute and recognize the rest of our team that is unable to be here. Our principal is Sally Yensho. The instructional specialist is Deneen Lashinsky. The STEP facilitator is Megan Freeman. And I am Jen Stutz. I'm a classroom teacher. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at Lower McCungie Middle School. And
I'm Erin Murphy. I'm one of the district supervisors that oversees MTSS. Nice to meet you all.
Okay, so we asked you all to grab a Post-it on your way in. If you didn't, then maybe there's some extras that we can pass around. We just wanted you to take a minute and write down a burning question that you have regarding middle level MTSS that you would like our team to answer, or us. Share a question with somebody sitting close to you, and we'll call on a few people to share in a moment or two. Okay. So hopefully that question will be answered by the end of our presentation, and if it's not, then hopefully we'll leave time at the end. We just wanted to give you all a brain break for a second. You did a lot. You wrote down a question. So some of the velociraptor noises in Jurassic Park are actually which animals mating? I had someone want to go ahead. A, tortoises. Yes, you are correct. You get a piece of...
Celebrate, friends. We're celebrating.
I know. It's my daughter's leftover Halloween. No, I'm kidding. I actually did go out and buy candy for you all.
Fresh Halloween candy.
The white chocolate one. So congrats. Yes.
Okay, so this is not the first MTSS session of the day, so hopefully at this point you've seen some definition of MTSS. Just really important to think about the PA's transition from RTII to MTSS and this idea that now we're really talking about behavior and all of our components of our educational system being but like incorporated into our MTSS systems. And we really like this definition lifted from the state that PA-MTSS represents a broad set of evidence-based practices. And this morning, I thought our opening presenter did a really nice job of defining evidence-based practices, because that's one of those terms that gets kind of like thrown around. So it was nice to hear her really concise definition of it. Okay, so this is a graphic that we use in our district. We put this on almost all of our MTSS slides. And could you click ahead for me real quick? And we make sure that it's animated in all of those slides too, just so that people see how all of those components really come together. Can you go back for me so I can talk about all of them? I know that that's really cheesy, but we want that to be a consistent reminder to individuals that this is what our system is. It's really the way we do business. So it's not like, oh, well, special ed does this over here, and in the MTSS model we do this. One of the things that we found, and then talking to other educators, is this seems to happen in lots of places, that a child gets identified as special ed and then all of a sudden they fall off the triangle. And then supports are different and processes become kind of muddled or different. So we really like to make sure that everybody understands that this is the way we do business. It impacts everything that we do in our organization. And we're really cautious about calling each other out when we don't use language about that. So we make sure that we're holding each other accountable to using language that encourages everyone to be following the same processes. We also heard our presenter this morning talk about the importance of leadership. So we make it an invested effort that our principals sit in on all of our MTSS meetings. We're going to talk about what all of our different meetings look like throughout this presentation. Our principals or assistant principals, there's always an administrator present. Often there's a central office administrator present as well, just because we feel like that communicates the right thing to our teachers, who are the ones who are boots on the ground. If we're not willing to put in the effort for the work, then our teachers don't see the value in it. Oh, is it time for another brain break already?
Oh my goodness, I hope I know the answer to this one. Okay.
I know this one too.
Okay, good, because I didn't study this one. Okay. The code in the matrix comes from what food recipes? That's a good one. Does anyone want to guess? D. We heard D. It's not D. Erin says it's not D. I didn't. She asked me before we started, do you know all the answers? I said, yeah. No, okay, let's give it. Do we want to give it away? Go ahead.
B.
What was it? Stir fry, which is
Not stir fry.
C. No, it's not stir fry.
B.
B. Dumplings.
Nope.
Oh, I don't think anyone's getting chocolate on that one. Sorry.
But really great effort. Thank you for the team dialogue here. Excellent. Okay, so again, hopefully this won't be the first time today that you see, or the last time today that you see an MTSS triangle. I'm going to be really transparent up top because we're going to share some of our numbers for you with students that are in interventions. We don't have a great triangle in our buildings right now. Some of you are nodding. Hopefully that, maybe that means that you also don't have great triangles. Our triangle's a little bit like, more like a mushroom. But obviously this is what is considered like the consistent breakdown. And you see that we put academics, behavior, and SEL on there. And then sometimes you see triangles that are actually diamonds because they put enrichment on the other side. We also believe that everybody goes on the same triangle. We get nervous that if you change the direction of the triangle or say that some kids are going the other direction, that encourages, again, kids falling off the triangle. So we put everybody on the same triangle because intervention can mean enrichment too, because it's what you need at that time for you. Okay. Awesome. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about what our Tier 1 looks like. So obviously in academics we have core instruction that for the most part I would say is considered evidence-based practice. This is something that we're really working on too, looking at that definition of evidence-based practice and ensuring that our work that we're doing in our classrooms is really aligned to what would be considered evidence-based practice. We don't necessarily have evidence-based purchased curriculums in all of our spaces. However, we are doing our due diligence to do the research and align our work to practices that have been considered valid and reliable in all of those different settings. We do, in addition, I want to make mention that we do use computer-aided instruction. So we have iReady for math. We also are, this year, just started to use Reflex, which is a math fluency program. We also are using Lexia Power Up Literacy. And technically, I don't know if there's any Lexia gurus in here, technically Lexia Power Up is considered an intervention. We are using it Tier 1 and finding that the majority of our kids need it. So like even our kids in our honors courses in 7th and 8th grade placed with needs in the Lexia Power Up system, especially word level needs, which was very interesting. In addition, this year we've also introduced Keys to Literacy, which is a cross-curricular literacy approach. It's not a program, I would call it an approach, and we started with their vocabulary strand. So that's being implemented across all grade levels, at the middle level, and all subject areas with the exception of math. They got some other things on their plate this year, but all of the other subject areas from family consumer science to tech ed to, they're having a lot more fun. We're going to have to get loud in a few minutes, I think. Okay, and then for behavior.
Yeah. So this year we started using the program Positivity Project. Positivity Project, or P2, is founded by Mike Irwin, and he believes, or the program is based on teaching kids that other people matter. And there's 24 characteristics. It's just a great program that we've started this year, and we're really already seeing a difference in our kids. We also, every year, at the start of our year, we model our expectations, and we ask our students to be sharp. So they're successful, helpful, aware, responsible, and proud. And when they are demonstrating those behaviors, we use the PBIS Rewards app to recognize them. They earn an amazing, or a zing, we call it, and they use those zings, or use those points, to buy items to get into big ticket events, we run my Hive mobile carts where students purchase items, like I said, purchase into big ticket items. Okay, and that's a student-run program. I run that program in the building. Oops, did I go ahead?
And did you talk about what some of your large group events look like?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was on there, but I skipped. Okay, oops.
Keep going.
Okay, so some of our large group events, we have one coming up. It's called Fall Fest. Kids will use their things to get into the event. In the event, we have teachers that volunteer to get pied in the face, which also gets kids to want to go there. So we have the PTO help out and run some of the activities that we have going on during the event, like the sack races. We have them guess candy corn. It's just a really school-wide event that kids are able to buy into, and we have that coming up in December. Some of the other events that we have, Pretzels and Pals. We do I was distracted by the.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really trying. We have cookies and cocoa, and we just really, every month I do a pizza raffle where students enter into the raffle and they could win pizza with their friends, and they eat during their lunch period. With the Taylor Swift stuff coming out, I just made a Taylor Swift tote bag, and the kids really bought into that. We had over 2,000 entries. They wanted to win the Taylor Swift bag. So simple things that we do to tie our kids to want to spend their points and get the kids excited about earning their zings. We really try and do in the building.
And the one thing we wanted to mention here too is that those large group rewards are meant to be tier 1. So I spent all my time in the classroom at the elementary level and then became an administrator at a middle school. And I love middle school humans. Like, you are a special kind of person if you found your niche in the middle school, for sure. But there was sort of a mindset shift when it was like, when we did large group activities at the elementary level, it was, of course, like, yes, everybody's gonna come. Yeah. But I did find that at the middle level, there was a little bit more of like, but he didn't hand in his homework this week, so like, I really like, almost like they wanted, like, trying to find a reason that maybe some kids shouldn't get to go. And they do have to earn it, and like, you are supposed to earn the points, but also just making sure that the idea is that you want the more the merrier. We want more kids there. So we don't want to nitpick what keeps kids out of it, and that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So just wanted to put that out there. Yeah?
So what are the other kids that don't get to go? What are they?
So the kids that don't get to go are staying on their core, they're in their core teams. They're either working on homework, they're working on maybe talking with the teacher about why they didn't get to go, what happened, they didn't earn the points. That's more tier 2 and tier 3 that we do that with those kids. But they're making sure we ask the teachers not to show a movie that day, not to do anything fun, because otherwise there's no incentive for them to go. Yeah, but our numbers are pretty high for them wanting to go, and we really try and make it attainable that they can get there. That's a good question.
Anything else? Okay. I think it's actually time for questions. Go ahead.
Perfect.
Oh, no, just kidding.
Okay, just kidding.
Just kidding. Wait, another slide. So the other piece of tier 1 is universal screening. So we do screen all of our students. We actually screen all of our secondary students, including our 9 through 12 kids. And then we use that information, that screening information, to assist in identifying instructional needs. And that's whole class. And then we'll talk about intervention 2 and 3. But we do have teachers, and we'll talk about this when we get to our DAT meeting, but our teachers use our tier 1 screening data to set tier 1 goals. So like goals for their core instruction. So maybe a deviation from what they typically would do or what their curriculum says they're going to do, but like maybe I'm going to start every class with a morphology activity because I notice that there's a large word level need in one of my classes or one of my sections. We identified the list of at-risk students, and then we do use that information to measure growth. A lot of our we still use SLOs in our district, and a lot of our teachers use this screening data for their SLOs. We screen in reading, we screen general reading and word level reading. I'll share with you what we use for our screening, but this isn't necessarily an endorsement of the tool. We use FastBridge. So we use FastBridge A reading for our general reading, and we use FastBridge Auto reading for our word level, which allows us to look at decoding, encoding, morphology, and I forget the last thing, synonyms and antonyms, I believe, at the middle level. And then in math, we use AMath for general, and math automaticity for the automaticity piece. We also have a SEL survey that the students take twice a year, and that's a self-reported survey, obviously, so there's some questions about validity there, but it does give us information about kids that might need secondary supports in SEL. Okay. So we're just going to pause for a minute. We talked so far about Tier 1, so we're going to get into Tier 2 and 3 next. But any questions about Tier 1? We have approximately 1,200 at Lower Macungie. We have 800 at Eyre Middle School.
How many staff do you have?
It's like 76 at Eyre, like 90 some.
We're really
Yeah.
A lot of those presentations, like we have 400 kids,
Yes.
70 staff members, we have 1,100.
Yeah.
We don't have that many.
We understand.
Feel you. I'm going to talk about class size in a minute.
Okay.
Anything else?
For your SEL survey,
Yeah.
do all students take that 3 times a year, or what's
I think it's twice.
So we actually give the SEL survey twice a year. All students, yes, but I am careful to say that like some of our students who we serve as nonverbal autistic students, some students who have emotional dysregulation that doesn't allow them to engage appropriately or fully in the survey. We do have various ways that we do try to get those students to engage, so like the survey can be read aloud to them, etc. But if it's going to be if it's really going to dysregulate the child for the day or be a major disturbance, and so there is a portion of our population, when I say all, it's not every kid. I just want to be clear about that. Yeah. Okay, so Tier 2 and 3. So we do offer Tier 2 and 3 supports in both academics and behavior. We did start our system years ago with academics specifically in the area of reading, and then built in behavior supports along the way, most recently post-pandemic. It was helpful for us starting with one component at a time, the idea that like we focus first on academics and then like we layered in behavior. In hindsight, possibly we would choose to go back and start with behavior first. So if you're building a brand new system, you might want to think about behavior before you think about something else. But I just wanted to be transparent. We wanted to be transparent about like what we did.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe this year we started teaching behaviors first, and that really helped us. Last year we did it the reverse, and it was better. I mean, we started with testing. We just started right off out the gate with teaching behaviors in the beginning of the year.
Okay, so we do Tier 2 and 3 placement meetings using that screening data. We do it once in the fall, once in the winter, and recently we started doing it again in the spring. So for our cherubs who are staying with us, so our 6th graders moving to 7th grade, our 7th graders moving to 8th grade, and actually our 5th graders coming up into 6th grade, we tentatively place all of those kids in intervention courses before they leave for the school year. Because what we were finding was it was a major disruption to their schedules. Again, elementary originally, we would just like, oh, it's what I need time, and we just like kind of move kids around, and it was no big deal. Like totally changing a middle schooler's schedule is crazy town, right? So like, yes, you're nodding, especially if you're an administrator and you're doing the one entering all the buttons. So it's definitely a little bit crazy. So we did this, and this year we definitely disrupted less kids' schedules than we have in the past. So that was one thing that we tried. We did better this year. The year before, we tried it, didn't go as great. So we're improving every year. So that's something that we've tried to sort of fix, like help our system. Panorama, that is what we use for our SEL, a DEI survey. Again, not necessarily an endorsement of the tool, just want you to know what we're using. And we do that in October and then again in the spring. Before our Tier 2 and Tier 3 data meetings, we ask our teachers to review the data for their students. We pull that data, make it available to them, they look at the data, and then they come together ready to discuss the interventions that might work for their students. And during the meetings, teachers identify the students based on our tier protocol. If you did open the slides, we have a link to our tier protocol at the end. It's definitely for the data nerds among you. Probably the down and dirty part of it, the down and dirty piece, is that if a kid is below the 15th percentile, we identify them for tier 3 services. And if a student is below the 40th percentile, we identify them for tier 2 services. Are you going to ask me if I can actually service all of them? Oh, okay.
Do they have them as like a team?
Yeah, so
Like, if you're, like for the regular school year, are kids teamed up and have shared teachers, like a team?
yes. Yeah, we do have a team model. I'll be honest, when I started at the middle level, like, I guess that was 2014. Was that 2014, Travis? Oh, it was? Okay. I took Travis's position when he moved on to be a principal. So in 2014, like, we had really solid teams. Like, your team was your team. Then things started to get weirder with math as we were accelerating. I turned my flashlight on. As we were accelerating kids for different reasons. And then it got kind of weird for science because the science labs were too small. So our kids are mostly teamed, but there is definitely some fuzziness in that. It's not as pure as it used to be. And then the meetings happen during that team's assigned team time. Yeah.
So when you're talking about tier 3 intervention, you're selecting students for the intervention in the previous school year, is that a separate class? Or
Yeah, that's next. Click it. Yeah. You question about this first?
So how do teachers receive the data, and then what does discussion look like, and then what is their input into the meeting sound like?
Okay. So let me answer your question. I do think we actually have a slide about this, but so there's two things. One, we use Panorama as our data management system. So teachers can go in, they can see their class, and then they can see the pretty like red, yellow, not that the red part's pretty, but red, yellow, green color coding for who needs what needs, has what needs. We get into the data, the IS, so Deneen Lashinsky for this building gets into the data before the meetings and actually creates a spreadsheet to make sure every kid is touched that needs to be touched. So she downloads a spreadsheet and she will color code the students that are below the 15th percentile, below the 40th percentile, and sends that out to the teachers so they can look at the student's name, think about how they perform in the class. For Tier 1, we have a very scripted protocol, which is actually linked to the last slide in our presentation that you can see, and ask teachers to look at, like, what do you notice about the benchmarks, and what do you notice about the kids that are just below the benchmark versus just above the benchmark, because those are your bubble kids, and those are the ones you're more likely to move. So it has them look at each of the components, and then they set a goal based on that. In these meetings, we look at, like, okay, so can you click ahead, actually? There we go. So we look at our breakdown, our continuum of reading development, and we look at our screening tests, and auto reading is a word level screener, as I said, and we worked left to right. So if a student is below the 15th percentile on a word level reading need, then we place them into interventions based on that word level need first. We always address word level before we move into fluency or comprehension. There's a little bit of a gray area there with middle level. So there was a time where the thought process was, if a student can't decode by the time they get to the middle level, or they aren't fluent by the time they get to the middle level, move on. We haven't really bought into that philosophy, and we have seen students make growth in some of our specific word level interventions. We use Orton-Gillingham, and this is on the later slide too, but I'll jump ahead. We use Orton-Gillingham. That's mostly a tier 3 intervention. For some kids, we do put 6 to 8 kids in the group, and then we consider it tier 2 because of the dosing. We also use Sunday System, which is an Orton-Gillingham-like program. It's interesting, we do have some, Orton-Gillingham, for those of you that are familiar, is very tactile, very multi-sensory. It's supposed to be the intervention for kids with word level needs. We have found at the middle level, and we also use these programs at our high school too, for our secondary learners, there are some kids that actually do better with Sunday system because it's pencil and paper, and there's something about that for the middle level kids. I have not done an evidence-based practice on it, so I cannot tell you what that is, but some of those secondary learners are actually doing better in Sunday system because because of the writing things out, more so than just like writing in sand or tracing it on sandpaper. But the main point with the continuum that we have here is that we look left to right first for when we're assessing students and placing them. And then these are our subtests that we give in our district. So that's what you see here are the subtests that we're assessing our kids on and where they would land based on their need. Okay? Did I answer all the parts of your question?
This the last part is when the teachers have that information of the names of students, they want to give you back information. How do they communicate back to?
Because we're all sitting in the room together.
Okay, so the team.
It happens in a meeting. Yeah, and that's like the benefit of our middle level schedule. Like the teachers have a team time built into their schedule. So when the kids are at their related arts courses. At the elementary level, we don't have that. So we typically end up giving up a faculty meeting period. So like instead of having a faculty meeting, we have 5 meetings after school and a different grade level comes to each of the meetings because we don't have that availability at the elementary level. So that's how we work around it. I saw another hand go up, I thought. Yeah.
So your tier 1 interventions and discussions take place, they take place with like subject area PLCs because that's a curricular issue, and then this level meeting is a team meeting because you're talking about those kids' needs in multiple subjects. Like when do you use PLCs just with LA and math versus?
It all actually happens during that same period, just not the same day of the week. Yeah. So like if I'm in 7th grade, my team period is period 1. So on Monday, I might be having my tier 2 and 3 conversation, and then later that week, I'm meeting with my PLC, my grade level ELA team, and I might be talking about my tier 1. Yes.
So considering the length of those meetings, what, 45 minutes perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
How many students on average, tier 2, tier 3, do you try to address and support?
This actually happens pretty quick because it's a matter of like sorting.
The data's already...
Yeah, the data's already there. If they're a high level need and it's word level, they're probably going into Orton. The next level's going into Sunday. Like that part's fairly quick. It's when we get into child study meetings, which we're going to talk about next.
Yeah.
That's when like those are longer meetings about individual kids. Yeah, but we don't put every kid that needs an intervention through a child study process because we don't know that they're not responding to the intervention yet. Here's our continuum for math. Research around, I won't pretend to be, I'm a reading specialist, not a math specialist, so I won't pretend to be an expert in math. But we do know that math doesn't necessarily generate in the same way reading does across the continuum. So in some places or for some students, we do work left to right and focus mostly on numbers and operations first. But in other circumstances, we end up really just like doing prerequisites. So if a 7th grade, for example, on-level course is getting ready to talk about algebra and algebraic thinking, our math intervention focus on pre-teaching some of those prerequisites for that, for those lessons before they get into those sessions in their main course. So we are not currently using a standard protocol intervention for our math standards course. Okay, so reading, the students are scheduled for a course that's called Reading Seminar. And this Reading Seminar course, in that Reading Seminar course, they would either be enrolled in Orton Gillingham or Sunday System. Those are our word level. And we do offer Orton as a Tier 3 or a Tier 2 intervention. For students that are receiving it as a Tier 3 intervention, they receive that intervention every single day. And they're in a group of no more than 4. For students who are receiving Orton as a Tier 2 intervention, they may be in a group up to 6, and they may be receiving that intervention every other day. So like on an AB day cycle. For comprehensive needs, We're using an intervention called Rewards, which is written by Anita Archer, who's one of like the mothers of SOR, and Read 180. So Read 180 we have found to be most successful for kids that I might consider like a bubble kid, so like high tier 2 students, not necessarily like our kids who are most striving readers. And then in 7th and 8th grade, we also have just small group reading remediation. So again, not necessarily like a standard protocol intervention, but just like traditional small group, possibly like what you might, just like small group reading remediation, like that you would almost see like an elementary classroom where it's like, I see this data that you have this need, I'm going to pull you into a small group and reteach that. That doesn't necessarily happen in a middle level classroom, so this provides an avenue for that to happen in addition to the core. Yep. Oh, yes. What are they not taking? Okay. So this, I don't like answering this question, but in 6th grade, the students do not take social studies. So the I know, sorry. I'm in charge of the humanities, like I used to be in charge of the humanities, I was in charge of the social studies department. They do not take social studies. The way we sort of offset that is the students are not pulled out of their core reading or their core ELA course. And the majority of the reading in our ELA course is nonfiction reading material that's aligned to the 6th grade social studies standards. So they're not sitting in a social studies course, but they are building some background knowledge. Research does say that background knowledge matters just as much as like almost anything else when it comes to reading. So we are making sure that they're still getting some of that background knowledge, but that's where they're coming from. In 7th grade, our ELA block is broken into an ELA course and a communications course. So our students do not go to their communications course in 7th grade, which is mostly speaking and listening skills, which they get in most of their other sections anyway. And in 8th grade, our students they go to their core ELA course, and then in 8th grade is when we introduce world language. So if a student is assigned to a reading seminar, they do not take a world language. We do not have block scheduling. We have a 9-block schedule. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, like a period. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
So if, let's say you have a bubble kiddo in 6th grade, and after 9 weeks you've made some progress, and, do you think that there's an intervention more to do than put them in history?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then interestingly, I'm going to talk about math now. So we'll flip to math, because here's the answer to that question you're not going to like also, so I'll prepare myself. We have some students, this is mostly tier 2. So as I said, we don't really have anybody receiving a tier 3 math intervention other than students that are perhaps in our enhanced learning support program. So these kids come out of one of their related arts. And they come out of a related arts every other day. Or no, I'm sorry, this year it's 1, 2, so we have a 6-day cycle. So they will go to related arts on day 1, 2, 3, and then they don't go to related arts on day 4, 5, 6. Sorry, I'll have another cup of coffee and then maybe counting will be easier. The related arts teachers love this. Not really, but we have worked with. Do you want to talk about a little bit like how they changed the system to improve?
So in the beginning, the students were all mixed, but we've now fixed it a little bit, and kids are now grouped together. So meaning all the math standards class are in one class. So then students we see in my building, we see them every other day. At IRA, they go on the 1, 2, 3. So I'll see, say, my 2, 4, 6 kids, and then I'll see my 1, 3, 5 kids, and I have them the same period, but I do see them every other day. So we've just modified our projects. I teach family consumer science. So I've modified my projects a little bit. They're still doing the same project, and we've just modified it. So to answer that question, so it's worked well. In the same cohort. Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, we do have, so There are some circumstances, like that's actually more of an issue with kids who require like a co-taught section, like those kids end up traveling together all day based on their profile, but this ends up not overly locking them into a section. And I don't think I answered your question about whether or not we would move a kid out of an intervention. Yeah, that's part of our progress monitoring system, which we will talk about on a later slide. If a student no longer needs an intervention and we have the data points to prove it, we do move them out. Also because we probably have somebody else waiting for that seat. So if they've demonstrated their progress and the team is happy with their progress and feel like they can continue it without the intervention, then we would move them out of the intervention and back into whatever they're not sitting in. Yeah.
Just to take you back off of what you had asked about the kids kind of traveling together because they need the same intervention all the time. We've recently put in a similar reading intervention. So an unintentional consequence of that is that the kids who don't like reading now have 3 periods of reading a day. The behavior, there's been an uptick in negative behaviors because a lot of those kids already had negative behaviors because of their deficits in reading. So now they're all being brought in to a group, and that's become a hotbed for behaviors. So I'm just wondering if you guys have seen any of that when you start to have kids pulled based on their need to be placed together in additional to what they already struggle with.
It depends who the teachers are.
Okay, no, that's.
I'm gonna just
That's
be
great.
honest, there are circumstances, and honestly, like, we saw it more with our math students, because they were suddenly now having 2 to 3 periods of math every day, and there were some teachers that got kids to buy in, and there were other teachers that didn't have the buy-in. And I don't mean to be flippant either, because there are some teachers who are just swinging from chandeliers and we're still not getting buy-in. I know that that's happening too. But there are some, we just have teachers that have done a really good job of facilitating buy-in. I think a lot of it, Jen mentioned the meetings that we have with kids too. So those one-on-one goal setting conversations, and then also them knowing that they do have the ability to get out. Here's what we're looking for. Here's the goal that we're setting. We want to see you make this amount of progress. It's, it's not impossible. We are creating these step-by-step goals. Here's what you can, and they track their progress. So letting them feel like they have the power or have control over their destiny, because that's something that's been taken away from them in the past.
And that's true, because kids really do want to be in our classes, the related arts, so that they can get themselves out of it. It is a great conversation to have with them, and we often do that. Go ahead. That's okay.
That's why we had to write your questions down.
That's good.
But how many reading specialists do you have? Do you have 4 different?
Coming. Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's the next slide. Here's
Yep.
the people. Perfect. Okay, so currently we have 371 students this is just at LMMS. So this is out of 1,200 kids. We have 371 students that are receiving services through Mass Standards. That does not necessarily mean that those were all the kids who have data that indicated they needed services, but there are some parents that refuse service. There are some students that, their scheduling wise, we just couldn't quite swing it, they might have needed too many other things. So that's current. We currently have 3 Math Standards teachers. 2 of them are ESSER funded, which means if we don't get a position added, which in our next budget cycle we are looking to add an actual contract for math and reading. If they don't get added, we'll be back down to only having 1 Math Standards teacher. So our plan for that, I can talk to you about our plan for that in a second. We also have an academic support teacher, which are essentially instructional assistants. They just happen to, most of them happen to have college degrees, and some of them actually are teaching certified. They just don't have a teaching position. And then in reading, we have 223 students, 3 reading seminar teachers. 2 of those are also ESSER funded, and 3 academic support teachers. And then in addition, we have, at this building, we have 9 learning support teachers. And each of them teaches 1 period of reading seminar. So they co-teach. In our contract, the teachers teach 5 sections a day. So they co-teach 4 sections and provide a section of our SEM. If we lose one of our ESSER-funded positions and can contract one, so we would have 2 reading seminar teachers. Probably what will happen is our learning support teachers will end up teaching 2, which means they will co-teach 1 less section. Yeah.
So you said for your for the seminars, you have typically 54 kids in a group and tier 2 up to 6 kids in a group. So the reading seminar only has that many students.
Yeah. So like in a given period, we might have, like for Read 180, for example, we can seat like 15 kids in that section. So we might have a group that is Read 180 and there's 15 kids, but we might have one RSEM teacher that's meeting with 3 kids only. So the other thing that we're probably going to need to consider, not probably, that we will need to consider if we don't staff or if we don't contract additional sections, is we will probably not be able to offer our intervention dosage that small, which means that those kids technically will be receiving like more of like a tier 2 intervention. I think that research into Orton Gillingham will tell you that like as long as the teacher can see each kid's mouth, you should be okay. So that's like our general metric of like how many kids can you put in this group? How many mouths can you see? That's not an exact science, but that is, yes.
So the resources you're using for reading for tier 3, does special ed use those same resources or do they use additional?
They use those same resources, yep, but those kids, our learning support students are most likely, if they have a goal in that area, are in the tier 3 sections. So they're not receiving like a tier 2, they would be receiving it as a tier 3. Does that make sense?
Students who are not identified who are receiving tier 3 support?
There are some, yeah, but
the learning support teachers as part of the reading seminar.
ask that question one more time.
For students who are not identified, who are receiving a tier 3 intervention,
Yeah.
that could be coming from a learning support teacher?
They could be with a learning support teacher. We seat the kids with IEP. Our children with IEPs get sat with the special ed teacher first. But if, like, I don't know how familiar you are with Orton, but like we can say a student needs Orton, but then they have to take, not a screening test, but they take like a placement test to decide which lessons we're starting on. So there's a chance that like if the learning support teacher was trained on Orton Intermediate and like the students land here, and so she's taking that group, then she might end up with a non-identified student in that group, even though the other 2 kids are identified because that's where they are. And then the reading specialist is taking the next level of kids. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you move your students back and forth between the tiers? Do you wait until marking period of time or do it at progress report time?
So we generally wait for tier 3, we're progress monitoring every other week. For tier 2, we're progress monitoring once a month. So we look for 3 to 6 data points that are at least 6 to 8 weeks apart, sometimes 10 weeks apart. And if a student is having a consistent ROI, then we would consider it progress. But the other thing we have to watch is like if we're progress monitoring them below grade level and they're making growth, then we would want to bump up their so if we're progress monitoring them at a 4th grade level, before we would say, oh, you've mastered this goal, we would then progress monitor for another set of like possibly 3 to make sure that they hit the goal at a 5th grade reading level. And then once they're within a grade level of their grade, so if it's a 7th grader, once they're within the 6th grade band, then we might say that they've mastered their goal. And then obviously if they have an IEP, we would need to convene the IEP team to make that decision about discontinuing an intervention. But if it's not a child without an IEP, then and we feel like they've made that appropriate progress, then we could move them back into their on-level course. Yeah? Yeah.
So do you do tier 2 intervention kind of like tier 3, like out of their special areas, or are they done within full classes?
So for reading, they're scheduled in that reading seminar class. Remember I told you that I was pulling them out of social studies? So yeah, so it's happening during another class period. So just like our friend in the front explained, they have 3 periods. If they're in 6th grade, they have 3 periods of reading or ELA throughout the day. So there's a lot of like pep talks and Jolly Ranchers, for sure.
All 6th graders get 2 periods a day?
All 6th graders get 2 periods a day because they have an ELA course and a reading course.
And that's 6, 7, and 8 gets 2 periods a day?
7th grade, they get an ELA course and a communications course. So communications was just like speaking and listening skills. So the 7th grade ELA teacher was really covering all of the tested subject, all the testing standards. And then in 8th grade, they had 1 ELA course or world language. Yes?
You mentioned that parents can use services.
Doesn't happen that often, but we do have some, I mean, just like we probably all have parents who like refuse to sign a PTE. We do have some parents that are like, heck no, you're not giving my kid this intervention. I can probably count them on one hand how many it happens across both of our buildings, but it does happen.
So when you determine that a student is either tier 2 or tier 3, then you bring the family in to discuss the results and say this is the plan, and then the parent can say, no, I don't want them in the social studies.
Yes.
So then what's the alternative option when they opt out?
Well, we make sure we put all of that in writing. And then we document actually in Panorama, like this intervention was offered to parents denied services on such and such date, upload the attachments of like the email correspondence. We ask the parents to respond to us usually via email, saying like so that we have email documentation of, like that they have received, that they declined services. We do still try to support the student in the core by like giving like appropriate accommodations in the core, but if they deny the intervention, then they don't receive it. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Oh yes, it's time for another break.
So who actually drew the sketch of Rose in the Titanic movie?
Oh, we got a lot of that.
James Cameron, that's very true. I'll give him a kid. I'm sorry. Is that good?
Yeah, we had lots of people who knew that one.
Oh, okay.
Gonna give out some candy? Okay.
Yeah, there you go. We're running low on time. Okay. So this is just an overview of our MTSS behavior framework. We have the Tier 1, the school-wide positive behavior. We have the meetings and referrals, the grade level team meetings that Erin talked about, the core team meetings, the MTSS meetings. And then for Tier 2, we have SWIBs and SAP. SAP referrals and permissions must be made for all students receiving Tier 2 group services. And these are all the group services that we offer. We have SAP groups, we have check-in and check-out, we have ELP. So you can see under each group, under the SAP groups, we have the Karen Foundation Valley Youth House, Mars. We have, Humanistic Change, Center for Humanistic Change, all of those. And if you have any questions about those, we can talk a little bit more about that. For tier 3, we have individualized supports. Permissions must be, again, received. So we have the BCBA, we have the STEP program, we have SEL programming, SAP and Mars, Lehigh Valley Health Network, which comes in to our school, and we have KNS Truancy and KNS MST. And if you have any questions about those, we can talk a little bit more about those if you need to. ELP is an after-school, almost like a tutoring program that we offer for students. We kind of, I don't know if it was a choice for them to go. No.
It's it stands for Extended Learning Program, and I actually think Travis Bloom came up with that name when he worked at IRE. Yeah, it was Extended Learning Program. That's what it stood for.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it was an after-school thing. We had a couple teachers run it.
Behavior in that, like, they just didn't want to go home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or they weren't doing their homework at home, so it was a place for them to do their homework.
Yeah.
And have a snack and have a chat with a teacher.
No.
So it was a green sheet. It was an extra pay for teachers. They signed up to get paid. Mm-hmm.
In our building with 1,200, they currently have one principal and one assistant principal and a dean of students. And then in our building that's a little over 800, they have 1 principal and 1 AP. Yeah.
Going back to the previous slide.
Yeah.
How did you, the internal staff groups that you have, I'm assuming there's different groups focusing on different behaviors or needs.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with what kind of groups you would offer your students?
It's based on need. So like, I know a few years ago at IR, we had like several students that were experienced acute trauma, like related to loss. So we worked with Center of Humanistic Change, and they brought in a grief group. Some of it has to do with like what these organizations are willing to offer. So when beggars can't be choosers. So like if Valley Youth House comes to us and they're like, hey, we're willing to offer a group on executive functioning.
That sounds like the external stuff. I was talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So like the ones that this Sweda or Shotwell.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll run like anger management groups. They were running a grief group. So we have like different groups, and then sometimes I think they run it during their lunch, or they'll run it during a ninth period, and that's once a week, I think, typically.
My question was there a way you identified what types of groups you would have, like the grief group, the anger group? I'm asking that we're in the process of doing that, and trying to figure out a good way to create those groups. We have a teacher forum that we're setting out to see if there's.
Yeah. So I think on our SAP referral, we kind of narrow down what the issue is that we're seeing, and then when we talk with the other teachers, okay, yes, you're seeing anger in your classroom, yes, that kid qualifies for an anger management group.
Okay, and then so a follow-up question: how long have you? I guess this is for everything, but how long have you been using this model? How many years?
So we started when I started this role. So in 2018 is when we like got the ball rolling. But we've really ramped it up post-COVID. Yeah.
And then, did you guys have like benchmarks for success? And like, have you seen, measurable benefits for your kids behaviorally, academically by doing this?
Behavior, yes. Since we've implemented a full MTSS framework for behavior, and like that's part of doing this for behavior, we also completely rewrote our discipline code. Which is a totally different presentation, but if you want to pull East Penn's discipline code, it's pretty comprehensive and restorative, so check it out. We rewrote our discipline code, and I feel like I need to knock on wood, but like our behavior incidents in our secondary schools have plummeted this school year. So with our models in place, so that for sure. Academically, yes, we are seeing growth for our students that are in reading interventions. We are not seeing the biggest bang for our buck in math, if I'm just being real with you. So we got to keep, that is an area of growth for us, for sure. Yeah.
For your tier 2 entrance and exit criteria, how do they get in? What's the meeting process look like?
Can I come back to that? Because we're going to talk about like what our meetings look like, and that'll tell you what our criteria looks like. And we have 5 minutes, so I'm going to go really, really fast. Okay, so, and then happy to like meet y'all out in the hallway if you have additional questions after the presentation, promise. So nobody loves a meeting, but if these meetings didn't exist, nothing would get done. So this takes up almost all of every administrator's time is being in these meetings, but we really do see the value in it, and if we aren't there, as I started by saying, it's not going to happen. So we have data meetings, our DAT meetings. Those are the ones we talked about for Tier 2 and Tier 1. Those happen 3 times a year. We have child study meetings. These are the meetings where we have the in-depth conversations about students. Again, if you opened our slides, we have a child study workbook that you can look at that talks about exactly what we talk about in all of those meetings. Teachers are required to document what they've tried in the Tier 1 before they recommend student for a child study meeting. If once a student has been recommended for child study, if they're already sitting in an intervention, once they become part of that child study process, the team is consistently looking at that student's progress monitoring data to see that we're making growth. And if they're not making growth, we reconvene the team after like 3 to 6 data points to talk about why and what we're going to do about it. And the first question is the intervention being implemented with fidelity? So before we pull a kid from an intervention, we do fidelity checks on the intervention itself. Our core team meetings, this is our principal, assistant principal, instructional specialists, counselors, psychologists. They sit together, they look at the progress monitoring data. Are kids getting progress monitored? Sometimes they're not. Got to double check, make sure the progress monitoring is actually happening. They also, during this time, look at attendance data, so any kids that would be considered at risk because their truancy is going, or not just their truancy, but their attendance records going up, their grades are slipping, so they pull kids that might be at risk. They look at all that information during those core team meetings. Those happen weekly. These child study meetings happen as needed when a teacher puts in a referral. And then our middle level MTSS team, this is the group that I lead. We meet every other month. I pull the teams together across both buildings, and we talk about what our pain points are, what we need to do, what we need to adjust moving forward. The instructional specialists from both buildings are constantly in my ear about what our issues are and what resources they need. So then we talk about those in meetings to make sure that we're offering a continuum of services in both of our buildings. Next. I talked about this a little bit already. We'll keep going. And again, core team, they are constantly watching that child's data. Keep going. We talked about the child setting. I did all that on the other slide. Keep going. Keep going. That's it. All right. I thought we were done. There it is. We finished. Yeah, question in the back.
On slide 23, the meetings that we have to have,
Yeah.
can we have that where we can actually see the links of where you use, like all of those links aren't clickable?
We made them clickable. It's the stuff that's on the last slide. So most of that stuff that's on slide 23 is also linked to the last slide. We made it because we made them like copies of rather than linking to our internal documents. Is there something not on there that you want?
Is it working?
I don't know, I just like I can't click anything in that, like blue.
But even the last slide doesn't have the child study worksheet.
The child study template's not on it? Okay, we'll put the child study one on there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just keep that. We'll put the child study one on there. Yes.
And we'll go make sure that
Yes. They're pretty tailored, but I can link them.
Where are you guys from?
Yeah. LMS is about 27% free and reduced. Yeah. That's our biggest one. 27% free and reduced, 40% special ed. Where are you? Oh, okay, yeah.